it as well. Because, you know, once you get a formula on the television, people then start copying it. So you get copycat I get confused with what I'm actually watching. But I do like it when they pick stuff up from the council dump and they turn it into something else, and then they sell it. They seem to make huge amounts of money. Some of it doesn't. But the people have gone, you know, you could have done this, you could have done that. Redondo Beach is right next door to LA Airport. Thick says my Baywatch meets Hounslow. I shall try and visualise that one. It's not easy, is it really? I've got a great story about a teacher, but I can't run with it at the moment because it's one of those, you know, one of those cases that seems to run. It's hilarious. You'll love the story. You'll love the story. Giant turtles who love our seas are British, apparently. Oh, I watched the program the other day. I got quite depressed, and it was one of those David Attenborough programs where it's at this certain time of the equinox or whatever it was, all these turtles appear out of they hatch. Millions of them, and they all come out on the sand. And what have they got to do? They've got to run like hell to the water. And what waits for them? Seagulls. They just stand there, they just pick them off. So when you see them, you think they're quite big, but they're little tiny things. They're less than an inch across, all these little turtles, and they come out of the sand and they run for the sea to try and make it. Very few of them actually make it because they're picked off by all these seagulls. I felt quite depressed actually. Thinking, oh dear, don't like stuff like that. Don't like that. 8 for 8. Oh no, we're finished. I just suddenly realised. I was just thinking to myself, oh, how much longer have I got to do? And I suddenly realised about a minute. Less than a minute. I can urge you to go to the LBC website, which is lbc.co.uk, and download the app, because I have 2 podcasts every day, and I have my free Little Bit Extra podcast and my free whole programme. You know, we've taken out the adverts, we've taken out the news, and the travel, and it's all there for you. All you have to do is just go to lbc.co.uk, download the app, and you can listen to everything. Robbie Williams on my free Little Bit Extra podcast, hanging out with Simon Cowell. I mean, I don't know what Robbie does nowadays, actually. One of the old One Direction members is said to be going on a world tour. That's why. And the Queen was seen on a video call. She really is doing so well. Mighty fine. As well as listening live to LBC, you can listen back to this and other LBC programs, as well as a range of podcasts. And there is a huge range. There are thousands and thousands of podcasts for you to download. I myself have about 7,000 or 8,000, which are available free of charge. Just go to the LBC website, download the app, and then you can download as many podcasts as you can to keep them forever. Have a lovely Tuesday. It's an 11th and an awful happening weather-wise and probably be mixed. 10 o'clock this morning. It's Jay Ryan. I'm Nick Steve Allen, but right now with breakfast on LBC, here's Nick Ferrari.
Thanks, Steve. At 7 o'clock on Tuesday, May the 11th, the long and unwinding roadmap. We are announcing the single biggest step on our roadmap. Let's protect these gains by continuing to exercise caution and common sense. We'll give you a guide to everything you can do, and a guide, of course, to the upcoming Queen's speech. Meanwhile, in other news, man charged with murder of the Kent PCSO.
A man's been charged with the murder of Kent police officer Julia James 2 weeks after she was found dead in Woodland. I'm LBC's Emma Cool with the latest.
Israel launches a major military offensive on the Gaza Strip.
We will not tolerate harm to our territory, to our capital, to our citizens, or to our soldiers. He who attacks us will pay a heavy price.
That's Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Full report later in the show.
On your radio, on Global Player, and
LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 7 o'clock, Boris Johnson is promising to revolutionise the adult education and training system in England. Plans to give everyone access to a flexible loan if they want to study or retrain will feature in today's Queen's speech. It's also expected to include controversial proposals forcing people to show photo ID before voting. Election lawyer Sarah Sagamon thinks it could discourage people from heading to the polls.
All of us must want to see voting made easier, to see more people voting, to see governments reaching out to those marginalised groups. And so whether it's Labour, Conservative, or some other political party that happens to be in charge, we don't want to see them ignoring the votes of vulnerable groups, and that's precisely what these measures will do.
The state opening of Parliament will be the Queen's first major public ceremonial duty since the death of her husband, the Duke of Edinburgh. It'll be scaled back drastically, though, because of COVID-19. A 21-year-old man has been charged with the murder of a police community support officer in Kent. Julia James, who was 53, was found dead in Woodland near her home in Snowdown 2 weeks ago. She'd been out walking her dog. Callum Wheeler from Aylsham will appear before magistrates later. There have been international calls for calm after rocket strikes between Gaza and Israel. Palestinian health officials say 20 people were killed in an attack in the Strip last night. Militant group Hamas had launched rockets into Israel, including towards Jerusalem, after what it says was police aggression against Arabs in the city. The Israeli ambassador to the UK, Tzipi Hotovely, says officers have been trying to keep the peace.
But the problem is those radicals Islamists, the Hamas terror organization, they try to do anything in their power to incite those rioters, and those rioters were piling those rocks and trying to do anything in their power to create violence on the holiest place.
Scotland's First Minister Nicola Sturgeon is due to announce whether the nation can take its next step out of lockdown on Monday. Moving to level 2 restrictions would mean up to 4 people from 2 households being allowed to meet indoors. Cinemas, theatres and concert halls will be among venues that can reopen. Apple is facing a £1 billion legal action after being accused of breaking UK competition law. The tech giant is facing claims that it overcharged millions of people to download apps through its App Store. Apple says it's taking steps to help smaller tech developers on its platforms. In the city, the FTSE 100 will reopen at 71.23 after closing down 6 points yesterday. The pound buys $1.41 and a euro 16. And the weather: showers across England and Wales, sun heavy with hail and thunder. Rain for Scotland will clear with sunny spells developing, mainly dry in Northern Ireland, a high of 17 degrees. From Global's newsroom, I'm Simon Conway.
Avi's online security business has landed a big new client who needs a lot more attention.
How can we put a top-class security team in place quickly?
It's time to hire. We need Indeed. Indeed you do. Indeed delivers quality candidates, so you can focus on hiring the person you need to help your business grow. If you're ready for Indeed to help your business get back to hiring, simply visit Indeed.com/try today. That's Indeed.com/try today.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Nick Ferrari at breakfast.
Morning, 4 minutes after 7 on Tuesday, May the 11th. Making progress along the long and unwinding roadmap now, on the way back to freedom. Full details of what it means, of course, from what we heard from the Prime Minister yesterday. That was the Prime Minister. You hear from the Queen later today, the Queen's speech. It's that time of year again. Stand by your beds for the Queen's speech. We cease Thea Osherwood with all the details. Children classrooms where, as of next week, children will be able to remove their masks and face coverings.
The masks can come off on Monday, but what do parents and pupils really think? I'm LBC's Charlotte Lynch on the school run in South London.
21-year-old man is charged with the murder of the Kent PCSO. We go to Israel, where sadly tensions are indeed again increasing, and more violence is feared. We'll give you full details on that. And to the doctor's surgery, or rather not to the doctor's surgery, the problems of face-to-face consultations, and how much longer might they last.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast. Call 0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC.
Of course, that Queen's speech, we're going to give you full details on that, but it's drastically scaled down from those of you who enjoy the pomp and pageantry that this country does so well. There'll be very little of it because of COVID. More on that in a moment, but due to COVID, let me give you the figures that I did every time. Everybody at around this time of day. So the number of first dose vaccinations made available for the figures from yesterday is an additional 100,626, taking the total number of first dose vaccinations to 35,472,295.
to second dose or booster vaccinations, that's up 187,171, taking the total number of second dose or booster vaccinations to 17 million. That's virtually half, isn't it, first now? 17,856,550. The new infections, well, that's up 2,357, which, for the first time since I can remember, is actually a lift in that rolling 7-day average, albeit a very small one, just 3 percentage points. The latest number of deaths, sadly, is at 4, which, if is of any interest to you, none of whom were in England. All the 4 fatalities, I have to tell you, were recorded in Wales, for the figures that were made available to us, taking the total number of deaths to 127,609. As I always say around this time, it's believed around 25% of those individuals most likely died with the virus rather than from the virus. And of course, condolences if your lives have been touched by any of that. We'll be spelling out in detail exactly what happens. Now, the long and unwinding road, as I'm calling it, to freedom, we've taken a few more steps. But let's pick up on a little of what we heard from the Prime Minister yesterday. Of course, you'll have heard it here on LBC. He was at Downing Street, and he confirmed that we are on course for that relaxation of England's restrictions from Monday.
Today, we are announcing the single biggest step on our roadmap, and it will allow us to do many of the things that we've yearned to do for a long time. So let's protect these gains by continuing to exercise caution and common sense.
Caution really was the watchword, and picked up by Chief Medical Officer Professor Chris Whitty, who said the virus was still prevalent in parts of the country.
It is beginning to spread in certain parts of the country, and we need to keep quite a close eye on this. So the point about this is the threats are significantly reduced, but there are still some residual issues that we need to keep a very close eye on, and therefore we need to go carefully and steadily.
And also joining in holding the handbrake, Chief Scientific Advisor Sir Patrick Vallance, talking of the importance of measures such as self-isolating after a positive test.
It's important that we continue to isolate if positive or with symptoms. That's really, really important to reduce the number of people out in circulation who are potentially able to pass the virus on.
Well, we're going to be hearing from an expert on air quality and someone who's part of a SAGE group as well, and someone in the hospitality business in a moment. Very quickly then, here's what's back on as of under step 3 of the roadmap. On Monday, you can meet in groups of 6 or 2 households inside, groups of up to 30 outside. Pubs, bars and restaurants can serve people indoors with table service. Cinemas, theatres, museums, concert halls, business conference centres can reopen. Overnight stays indoors are allowed, meaning hotels, B&Bs can open. Face masks no longer needed in secondary school classrooms or communal areas. We'll at a school later in the show. Hugging returns with social distancing rules lifted within groups of 6 or 2 households, but you should try and keep the windows open, it says here. All remaining university students can return to in-person teaching. They won't have much of it, they'll be coming straight back in a couple of weeks. A number of named visitors for residency care homes rises from 2 to 5. The ban on overseas holidays lifts. We've already told you those countries. Indoor adult sport and exercise classes resume. Saunas and steam rooms reopen. Weddings, receptions can take place with up to 30 people. And there's no cap on funeral attendees, with maximums for safe services set by venues. Tim Sharp is a professor, expert on indoor air quality at the University of Strathclyde, and sits on one of the SAGE's modelling groups, but speaking in a personal capacity. Professor, the idea of keeping windows open when you hug, is that really necessary, or are we just being uber cautious on that one? Good morning.
Good morning. Yes, those two things aren't directly related. What we have is where people are indoors, that's where the risk is increased. So the more people you have indoors, the more ventilation you need to do that. So if people are indoors and they're hugging, then you're opening the windows really just to keep the air fresh.
As an expert on this, the pace at which the country is moving, the fact that the Prime Minister resisting pressure to move a little quicker, is he right so to do in your view?
I think so. You can, when you're reading out the figures there, slight uptick.
Yep.
Some areas where it's so you can, the effectiveness has been the lockdown. It has been effective. It's done what we wanted it to do, but so completely unlocking immediately would push things back a little bit.
There's an appeal for common sense. Sadly, you'll be aware, Professor, sense? How much of a concern should that be?
Well, it's always a concern. I mean, what's been really clear through this is the vast majority of people have done what they need to do, and that's why it's been successful. That's why we've got to where we are. There's always going to be a group of people who cannot or will not do the right thing, and we have to kind of factor that in as possible. But most people really, they know what they should be doing. They're really pretty careful. No one's perfect. Everybody sort of makes the odd sort of slip here and there, but generally speaking, it's having an effect.
And lastly, relaxed about children in schools being able not to wear masks now.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think so. As we're going into the summer months, things are opening up. It seems that it's possible to do that. As with all things, you need to keep an eye on what the numbers do, but it's probably a decent move at this stage.
Thanks for your time, Tim Sharp, Professor and expert on indoor air quality from the University of Strathclyde. But one of the industries, obviously, that's chomping at the bit is the pub and hospitality trade, although, of course, they have been able to work, but they needed an outdoor area. William Lees-Jones is the CEO of brewery and pub operator J.W. Lees and joins me now. What does this mean for your estate and your colleagues? How many have you been able to run up until next Monday, prior to hopefully opening all of them? Good morning to you.
Good morning, Nick. Up to this point, we've been able to open about half of our pubs, and the one thing that I'd say is that the resilience of our guests and our teams has been amazing because the weather's not been great.
And what about the I'll use the word, thirst from your clientele? Did you notice that people were really ready to get back to the pub?
I think people can't wait to get back to the pub, and one of the things that it really highlights is how important the pub is for many people's social life, their mental health. There's a lot of people who live on their own who come to the pub, but for us, even though we're reopening indoors next Monday, we're 41 days away from the 21st of June when restrictions stop, and I have to confess I'm quite worried because some of the conditions that we've had placed on us, like table service, are going to make it really hard work.
Would you have wanted the government to move more swiftly?
Yes, very much so. I think that when the Prime Minister outlined the roadmap 3 months ago, I don't think he could have foreseen us being in a better place than we are. The vaccination programme is amazing. There were very few deaths in the last couple of days, and there comes a point where we just need to be open. And actually, if he was looking at the data, in my mind, to say, look, this is going really well, we can reopen a couple of weeks earlier, would have made a huge difference. Because
I understand why you say that as a businessman, but many people would refer you to what we heard from the Chief Medical Officer and the Chief Scientific Officer yesterday, Mr. Lees-Jones.
Yes, and it's their job to be cautious, but there are 3 million jobs in hospitality. We're losing more than £200 million a day, and until these restrictions are dropped, we will continue to lose an awful lot of money, and that puts all those jobs under pressure.
Lastly, in months and years even to come, what will COVID have done to the pub trade?
I think it will have reminded us how important pubs are to the fabric of society and how much people have missed them. Unfortunately, I think there'll be some pubs that don't come back, but I'm sure there'll be people who will revive those pubs. On a positive side, it will have seen a huge acceleration in terms of how pubs embrace technology, and there are lots of positives that come out of that as well.
Good luck to you and all your colleagues. It's going to be a busy weekend and a very busy Monday, I imagine. William Lees-Jones is CEO of the brewery and pub operator J.W. Lees. They employ around 1,300 people. So good luck with that. All right. What is it you're looking forward to? Come on, be honest. You've been hugging. I would imagine many of you, if not most of you, if not all of you, have probably hugged someone during this time in reality. So is that really something? And the idea, of course, that there is some sense of normality. We'll take your calls on that. Also to Israel, clashes between Israeli police and Palestinians at the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem. A major military offensive launched in the Gaza Strip last night, reportedly killing 20 people in response to a barrage of rockets fired towards Jerusalem. We'll have a report on that. 7:16 LBC News headlines. Simon Conway.
Boris Johnson is promising to revolutionise the adult education and training system with legislation included in today's Queen's speech. There have been international calls for calm after rocket strikes between Israel and Gaza. Nicola Sturgeon is due to announce later whether Scotland can take its next step out of lockdown on Monday. The weather, sunny spells and some heavy showers, a high of 17 degrees.
LBC Travel Line Joanne Webb said the problems on the trains do continue because of the ongoing safety checks affecting Great Western Railway and London North Eastern Railway. Lots of cancellations, especially to their high-speed services. Also on the train, Southern can't run between Purley and Causton Town and between Purley and Caterham. On the Underground, there are severe delays on the Circle, the Hammersmith and City and the District lines.